Doctors, nurses, and hospital staff of Reddit, what are your experiences? Funny, sad, horrible, with people waking from anesthesia? NSW. I was coming around from surgery and the nurse who was looking after me had a crush on a guy I dated when I first started nursing, several years before. It was rather surreal to go from deep sleep to talking about an ex-boyfriend I had hardly thought about in years. I almost feel it was an abuse of her power. I could have said anything coming out. You don't expect to be interrogated about a past relationship the first thing waking up from major surgery. In the end I found out some gossip. The relationship didn't last long and apparently he was hurt that I wasn't devastated when we broke up and that I started dating someone new within a few weeks. Slightly different in that it wasn't anesthesia, but rather sedative meds. I worked in a hospital years ago, and once had a patient who had an extreme paradoxical reaction, opposite of what is expected, to her Ambien. She went off the rails. She started hallucinating that she was in a hostage situation with a man who was killing babies. One nurse went in the middle of the night while doing her rounds and the patient attacked her with a folded wire hanger and severely beat her in the face and head. The nurse ended up with multiple broken bones in her face, blacked both eyes, and a number of deep wounds on her face. She was gone for a while on workman's comp but eventually quit, stating the experience had traumatized her and she didn't want to be in the building again. Don't know whatever happened to the patient but I doubt she would have been punished or charged, since she was not in her right state of mind and nobody expected such a reaction to the medicine. I'd like to seize this chance to say sorry to that poor guy who was around when I woke up. First thing I said was, I got a puke and I did so generously while he helped me suffer through this. Then I looked at him and said, "What's your name?" I don't know what he answered, because he reminded me of a friend of my sister. So I told him, "Well, you look more like a Tobias to me." He laughed and said that I look like a Hugo to him then. My dizzy mind then thought it was nice to say, "So does your mom." Then I laughed and puked again. I fell asleep soon after and another nurse was there when they brought me back to my room, so I never got the chance to apologize. While it's a good story, I still feel a little embarrassed. Can just hope that guy has seen worse. If I was that dude, I would chuckle for years to come. We had a cute little guy, 6yo, who was getting his arm set in emerg after a pretty big playground fall. He'd been waiting patiently for about 3 hours, was a super trooper all through the x-rays, the IV, and while we get him set up on monitors, they were talking about how he wouldn't remember the doctors putting his bones back in place because of the meds and how he'd probably have funny dreams from them too. So he should think of something good right before we gave them. Having taken care of him all shift, and knowing how hungry this kid was, he was restricted from eating till he was in the cast. I said, "You like hamburgers, right? Maybe mom and dad can take you to McDonald's when you're done as a treat." The dad was like, "Yeah, cool buddy, we'll do that. Just get this all done first." So we push the special K and the kid conks out. The is a bit difficult. It was radial ulnar snap a couple inches below the wrist. Big fush from a height almost an S shape. He was only out for about 10-15 minutes and came awake after that but was still partly under for a good while. The mom and dad were rubbing his shoulders getting ready to go as soon as he was up and able. When they asked him if he had any dreams he said kind of drunkenly, "Hamburgers dancing." It's much cuter when said by a heroic sleepy 6-year-old. Not a hospital staff but my grandma recently had to get anesthesia. When she woke up she went paranoid and thought that the doctors and nurses wanted to kill her to harvest her organs. We had to try to explain to her that at her age, there wasn't much that would be worth it. Many elderly people, especially those with a baseline of dementia, have adverse reactions to anesthesia. They are frequently cookie for a few days. Also, interestingly enough, they can still harvest organs from the elderly. The lifelink rep at my hospital says she has had some organs taken from people as old as 90. While on my 3rd year surgery rotation, I was meeting my patient in pre-op. He was a stern-looking Iraq war vet. I told him that me and another med student would be viewing or assisting the procedure, repairing and shit-shoot fistula. Since the other med student, Jim, was stuck in another OR, I asked him to help me mock Jim for showing up late. Without flinching, he casually says, "Oh Jim, I've heard about that guy on the internet. Isn't he some kind of disgusting physical shaming deviant borderline pedophile? Bro, not what I was thinking. But sure, let's do it your way. Med students are pretty low on the totem pole in an OR, so no one outside of the attending even knew Jim would be sitting in on the procedure. We had just started this rotation at a new hospital, so no staff really knew Jim at all. So we roll the patient in, and we're getting ready to administer meds. He signals me. He's now very worried that we're gonna put him under without getting to prank Jim. Jim enters the room as our patient starts to knock off. He introduces himself. Hello everyone, I'm Jim, a third year med student, and I'll be sitting in on this procedure. The patient's eyes opened wildly. He screams "Frick you Jim," and is out. Everyone was silent for 5 seconds before I cracked up and explained what happened in pre-op. So all was good. When he woke up, his first words were, "Did we get him?" "We got him." Sedated fist bump. Dude was committed to the joke. Woke up from a 2-hour reconstructive surgery on my ear. They had removed most of the skin between my ear and my head, opened it like a door and built me a new eardrum. As soon as I woke up, I had to clean. So I started walking around the ward in my assless gown, trailing an IV, and looking for stuff to throw away. Nurse was not amused, but I refused to stop cleaning. She gave me a piece of paper and told me to throw this away then go back to bed. I agreed. Also, what's with everyone being put under for wisdom teeth removal? I had mine yanked. Then I drove home 15 minutes later. Jesus, I feel lucky my wisdom teeth came through. A lot of times, doctors will try to pull wisdom teeth early, before they cause too much impaction. If they haven't broken the gum surface yet, it's a pretty involved oral surgery that can take a long time. Also, some people are wimps. I went in to get all 4 of my wisdom teeth pulled, and they used light anesthesia on me because I did not want to be awake in any way. The first thing I remember when I came out was my girlfriend at the time, and 3 nurses laughing hysterically. I didn't know what was going on. They kept saying to me, "Sing us your song. Sing us the song." And I kept asking what song. My girlfriend says, "They told me all about the body condom midget lover song you kept singing. I want to hear." Supposedly when I first woke up, they asked who had brought me in for the surgery. "You aren't allowed to drive away after anesthesia done." And I responded something to the effect of, "My midget." They couldn't believe it, but I was adamant that my midget had brought me. I then began to sing a song called Body Condom Midget Lover, which I don't remember a single word of. So one nurse went out into the waiting room and started looking for a little person. Of course there was no little person, so they just asked, "Who brought Madison for surgery?" I guess they were shocked when a normal woman walked up and said, "Me." Unfortunately, I still can't remember that song, but I hope all those nurses never forgot it. TLDR woke up from anesthesia telling the nurses a midget brought me for surgery, and proceeded to sing a song Body Condom Midget Lover, which I never sang before. I had ingrown canines. They were basically growing sideways in the roof of my mouth. Anyways, once I woke up, my wife, who was then my girlfriend, had to leave the dentist office to go to the bathroom or something before we left. Anyways, when she was leaving, I started singing Baby Come Back. I did this with a hole in the roof of my mouth where they were trying to pull my canines out through 2 missing baby canines which were just removed, and under a crap ton of anesthesia while my mouth was filled with blood. So, needless to say, I had quite the lisp. She said it was both the cutest and scariest thing I had ever done. Not me. A male friend broke his nose, which was a bit off to begin with, and asked the doctor to not give him a cosmetic operation, only functional since he couldn't breathe well. Before the operation, a nurse had him stripped to put the operation robe on. While high on anesthesia, he proceeds to brag about his dong and tell the nurse how hot she is, to which she only laughs. Operation goes well. The doctor, however, once he cut the nose bridge or whatever and placed the nose in its new place, thought the cosmetic one looked too good to not be done, so he did it anyways. Friend wakes up, sees his nose in a mirror pointing upwards, starts to get real angry, almost punching the mirror, until the hot nurse came in. Next words were, "How you like my new hot nose?" There was another male nurse on the room. After trying to hit on the female nurse, patient said to him, "Hey, I am really hungry. Come bring us a pizza and I'll pay you later guys game even while high. I was the patient in this one, but I was having a squint corrected by surgery when I was 5. They gave me anesthesia but it just made me more and more hyper. I was bouncing around the little cot they'd put me in as the doctor said to my mum, I don't understand. He should be going to sleep. The bit I remember clear as day was when, with my surgery window about to close, they switched drugs and pinned my down with a mask on. In my memory it is super violent and traumatic. I'm sure it wasn't. But they were wearing masks and I was a kid and basically became terrified of doctors for a while. A lot of sedatives and anesthetics have the complete opposite effect when given to kids. They get hyper and excited rather than sleepy. After a not so routine septoplasty on a VIP, only bodyguards and close staff were initially authorized to be present at bedside when he came out of anesthetic anesthesia. However, the family, particularly the wife and mother, protested heavily and, due to their status, were permitted entry despite the initial orders. As he started coming around, the nurse, per protocol, got him ambulatory and steered toward the toilet. However, after several stumbling, albeit assisted steps later, the patient pulled up his robe, grasped his erect dong, and proceeded to urinate on the small, assembled group in great, arcing streams, swaying his hips from left to right like a lawn sprinkler on a putting green, seemingly oblivious to his deed. The group literally did not budge as the patient hosed them down for the better part of 10 seconds, as our staff scrambled for protection, and I was able to get behind him and gently wrestle him toward the toilet. Staff respectfully but quickly ushered the befouled group out and into another room to gather themselves and dry off just as we made it into the tiled bath. The patient arranged himself as I attempted to steady him, and suddenly became rigid, putting out his hand as if to say, I've got this. I asked to be sure, and he turned his head and winked, a broad smile beneath his heavily packed and bandaged nose. Not every day you get to pee on your family to get them to pee off. I had an appendectomy when I was 17, 1987. When I woke up after surgery I was singing Wild Thing very loudly, but I was still under a bit so I hadn't tried to open my eyes or sit up. When I finally did wake up I couldn't see at all. I was screaming I'm blind, I can't see, and my mom and dad were in the room with me thinking I was indeed blind from the anesthesia. The doctor eventually came in and explained that this happens sometimes and it can take a bit for eyesight to return. It took 30 minutes and the entire time I really thought I was never going to see again. Then to make matters worse I was in horrible pain and the nurse said we will get you a shot really quick. While giving me the shot I started to speak and then the Demerol hit me and I threw up everywhere. I was home after having my wisdom teeth removed and I asked my dad for a bottle of water. I still had the gauze in my mouth, so I couldn't close my mouth all the way to swallow. So of course, water dribbled down my chin. The water was red from the blood, but my drug-induced mind thought, oh my gosh, I just drank water and it came out red like wine. Wine like Jesus. I'm Jesus, yeah. My very religious father didn't take this too well, lol. Who also had the 3 heart monitor patches on me still, and when I felt them, they were pointy. So again, my drug-induced mind thought, where did these extra nipples come from? Oh crap, I have 5 nipples now. I was at an inner city teaching hospital and this young lady comes in with a dislocated shoulder that happened during some acrobatic fricking. Her words, we tried a single maneuver without sedation, but figured out pretty quickly that it wasn't going to happen. Instructions were given to get her set up for a more in-depth shoulder reduction. I came back in the room, and things seemed ready to go. Some meds were given, including one that can make folks pretty disinhibited. The patient gave a loud sigh and laid back. The way we do this is give the meds and then work pretty quickly to get the shoulder fixed. It lets us use less medication. However, in this case, things were done correctly. We were going to use some sheets to help apply counter traction, and they were laid out completely incorrectly. While we worked to get the sheet properly placed, the patient opened her eyes and announced, I'm just gonna finish real quick, pulled the gown aside and started masturbating. One of the techs grabbed her, but grabbed the bad arm. She yelled, "'Cause it hurt," and he let go and walked out of the room. He was upset, and there were some issues there. She looked me right in the eye and said, "Help me out or get out of the way. I will like it more if you watch." The nurse that was giving the meds at this point lost it, and just started laughing her face off, and the patient attacked herself with renewed energy while I tried to cover her with a sheet. Less than 60 seconds, and she was very vocally done. Thankfully, I had my choice of people just outside the room to help me get her positioned and reduced. Very next shift, I had it out with those two. The tech still seemed horrified. The nurse seemed to take it very seriously. Later that night, we had a nasty GI bleed that lost control of their bowels. I was trying to help out, and she leaned over and whispered, "Help me out or get out of the way. I will like it more if you watch." I died so many ways. The staff worked that phrase into so many great circumstances for the rest of my time there. Patient here. Had to be gassed when I got my wisdom teeth removed. Apparently my jaw needed some kinda jiggering, so they doped me really well. Luckily my wife was there to keep contained. When I came out of surgery, I apparently called the nurses cold bags, probably for being rude, and tried to cheer them up by singing the Adventure Time theme song with a mouthful of gauze and blood. This is assumption by the way, as my wife had to fill in the gaps in my memory, but what followed kinda confirms things. The nurses, fed up with my attempts to soothe them, told me to pipe down and handed me a whiteboard with a marker. This is how I was meant to talk for the next while. I took some artistic liberties and drew my best Jake and Finn for them and kept trying to stop the nurses as they rushed past me so I could show them my drawing. Nobody stopped, so I sat there weeping and smiling, unsure what I was supposed to feel. I was quite a sight. A 6-foot tall heavily tattooed child smiling and crying like a doofus in his wheelchair, hoping the nurses he insulted would be proud of his artwork. I did a 3-day internship at a vet in 8th grade, and I got to watch them operate, mostly castration neutering, and one time they brought in a wildcat, like a European one, so it looked just like a house cat with weird markings. It was oddly tame, and let me touch it. It also had only 3 legs. The last one had got stuck in a trap, and was in for some infection, had gotten stuck in another trap, so we got the needles ready. Well, the vet did, and it was fine, until the vet injected it. It must have hated needles, because it started literally running as Cyril's ABD hissing. They got it in a net eventually, but it still wouldn't calm down. They doubled the dose, then tripled it. Finally it nodded off, but still kept waking up very so often to glare at us. After the operation it went back to being nearly tame, let me pet it, gave me a nuzzle and was released the next day. Code browns are pretty common. Patients crapping themselves during anesthesia or on emergence. One of my patients who was in lithotomy position for a gyn procedure, vulvectomy, started wiggling a bit. The surgeon was positioned between the patient's legs, putting a wound vac on, and was almost done, so I had turned off the anesthetic. Well, she ended up squirting a dark brown streak of poop up the surgeon's gown and up her mask. Surgeon was less that pleased. I told her she should have finished up faster and that I was sorry, but I ran out of quarters for the anesthesia machine. So preface to this story, I have a pretty severe fear of needles, so much so that my skin crawls just thinking about them going into my skin. Anyways, I had to have my wisdom teeth pulled, so they put me under, but not before I almost had a panic attack when they put the needle in my arm. The machine had to try almost 5 times to get my blood pressure. Now I don't remember any of this and had to hear it second hand from my so. But apparently I was so scared and paranoid because of the needle that I woke up and immediately tried to yank it out of my arm. My so had to kinda hold me down and stop me from yanking it out. Same thing for the gauze in my mouth, except I tried to bite the nurse. I then became paranoid that no one was who they said they were, and refused to believe my mom was who she said she was, and for a time who my so said she was. Eventually started quizzing my so on what her favorite color was, asking her what necklace I got her recently, etc. After that the real crap started going down. I then feared for my so's life, so I started teaching her how to punch and telling her to aim for the throat and to run. Apparently I went into a great deal of depth. After that I started to sob because I thought she and I were going to die and I didn't want the needle in my arm anymore, which in turn made the nurses, my mother, and my so start to cry as well. Eventually the nurses told my mother that I needed to go because I was upsetting, freaking out the other patients with my screaming and sobbing. On the car ride home I snapped out of it and my memory returned. Both my so and mother were peeved because I was suddenly fine after putting them through so much. To this day my mother won't talk to me about it and just says that it was really bad, but the nurses said they have never seen anything like it before. The patient still had that slow nod going as she mumbled that she wanted the man in black to get out of her room. I was wearing dark blue scrubs, so I thought she meant me. I gave her some space and when I came back to check on her, she said he's following you now. Cool. Not a doctor, but recently I had stitches put in my face and I was swarmed by cute nurses and a cute medical student. I was told that I asked out the student and was hitting on all the rest. I was also told they were laughing the whole time, so I guess they probably felt good but a little awkward. I once had a patient that went in for a relatively safe procedure. He was getting shoulder surgery for a torn rotator cuff. When he was coming off anesthesia and having his breathing tube removed, his throat clamped down and he wasn't able to breathe for a good 3 minutes. After we finally are able to get him re-intubated and eventually have the tube removed again, this time with no incidents, he wakes up and yells, "I remember everything." We all get worried and assume he means he remembered the incident where his throat closed, only to later find out he was joking with us about remembering everything through his anesthesia. He is still to this day one of my favorite patients. Didn't happen to me, but I have a friend that's a doctor and he told me this story while we were discussing medical stuff. He was looking after a younger guy, around the age of 18 or 19. He was out of the PACU, post-anesthetic care unit, but still loopy. Both my friend and a nurse were in his room and were assessing him. He says to his mom, who was sitting in a chair next to him waiting for him to get back from surgery, "Gee, you're really cute. Can you give me a blowjob?" The mom's face went beet red in an instant. It was a good thing I wasn't there because I don't think I would have been able to keep my cool. I was the patient in this case. I had been put under for a colonoscopy endoscopy combo, and for some reason as soon as I woke up the nurse gave me my phone even though I was out of it. Found out the next day from my brother I had sent multiple snaps to his best friend who has had multiple colonoscopies, letting him know that we were now butt buddies and that I understood him better than my brother because I had a camera in my butt too. A lady I worked with had her wisdom teeth removed when she was in her mid-30s. Afterwards, her kids took her to Kroger to wait on her pain med script to be filled, during which time she walked up and down every aisle of the store yelling at strangers, "Frick you. No, no, frick you." She even yelled at a little kid. I guess she wasn't fully clear-headed yet. Her kids were mortified when she was escorted out by a manager. I was getting jaw surgery done when I was 18, and when they were pushing the Valium they told me I'd start feeling drunk. I remember saying as I had never tried drinking, "So this is what being drunk feels like." The oral surgeon said yes and I said, "Well, this sucks," and promptly passed out. I then woke up during the procedure and grabbed her leg hard and squeezed as hard as I could. She then said night night and pushed some more meds and got me back under. Don't work at a hospital, but this one is about my mother. She was going in when I was around 12 to some appointment. I can't remember what. So, she got it done, and my dad and I were waiting in a separate room for her. Thing is, she had been anesthetized. She sits on the hospital chair thing, and just starts talking like she usually does. Except it isn't like she usually does. She starts saying stuff in a slurred voice and keeps repeating, "I can't articulate." Even in her whacked out moment, this woman was weirded out that she couldn't enunciate words right. Love you, Mom. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.